Beck. Those on the committee include Elder Andrew Gordon, and the chairman, Elder Monty Shoulders, and Elder Bradley Hicks. Brother Morgan.
Just as a brief comment, I just want to praise the Lord for a series of services this weekend. I've been thoroughly blessed and encouraged, and appreciate all the messages and discussions of subjects that have taken place thus far. I want to ask everybody to give consideration to this topic that was provided to us. Give due diligence to it, pray that it be a benefit to us. The association's purpose and desired effect. What is the biblical purpose of the annual association meeting? And in what ways can we improve the structure or format to better achieve its purpose? Traditionally, the association meets 2 days out of the year. Are there ways to utilize finances and resources and talents of the association to enhance these efforts throughout the calendar year? Our report is as follows. It is easy for those who have invested minimal time and energy into something to criticize it. And it is equally easy for those who have invested a considerable amount of time and energy into something to immune themselves from any criticism. In fairness to both, when we consider this topic, we must proceed with honesty and humility. Humility because after serious consideration, some skeptics may learn that our predecessors, in a different time and under different circumstances, developed an institution that played a pivotal role in establishing sound churches. But we must also proceed with honesty. If we desire to carry out the commission of the Lord and maintain orthodoxy in both doctrine and practice, then we must address the true state of this association. This report is our attempt at a humble and honest analysis of our Bethel Association. We have tried to accurately gauge the present utility of this institution and whether the format and structure of our association is biblical and most beneficial as it is presently constructed. As a whole, we find it well constructed. However, in a few areas, we recommend modest changes to enhance its effect. As our committee discussed these topics and informally polled various associational participants, what quickly became evident was the lack of understanding regarding the purpose of the association. After gauging many of our younger generation, they thought that it was largely an outdated practice of old men who talk about stuff, more commonly referred to. The ones who grew up in church grasped the semblance of purpose, but struggled to see the association's relevance and benefit to their church and respectfully questioned its utility. Common questions we heard from younger generation members were this: what is the association's purpose and what are they trying to do? Is the association a year-round thing, or is it something that just meets once a year? Can anyone attend the association? And if you come, what do non-messengers do in the service? As for the older generations that we spoke to, they understood more clearly the broader purpose of the association, but explained it with hesitancy and uncertainty. Some said that the association's purpose was to discuss important topics that the churches should consider about doctrine and practice. Some said it was merely a weekend of fellowship meant to cultivate the relationship between sister churches. Others said it was to foster encouragement and to redirect our churches into paths of righteousness. These are all good answers. But what became evident to our committee was a lack of clarity about the purpose of our association. In the Scriptures, we do not see any type of formal associations as we have in modern times. But we do see things that resemble what can be considered an informal association. What we mean by informal associations is this: occasions when churches are spoken about collectively, or accounts when groups of elders, presumably from different local churches, are called together to counsel the early churches. Examples of this can be found in Acts chapter 15. The dispute about circumcision in the early church, followed by Paul and Barnabas in their first missionary journey. Paul's letters to the churches of Galatia, in Galatians chapter 1 and verse 2, where he addresses doctrinal and practices that are issuing this group of churches and that they have gotten them wrong. Jesus' words of encouragement and correction to the churches of Asia Minor in the book of Revelation in chapters 2 and chapter 3. Peter's explanation of the Judean elders about the expansion of the church to the Gentiles and his experience with Cornelius in Acts chapter 11. Associational teachers or representatives sent to the young Gentile churches to establish doctrine and identify false teaching and encourage sound behavior, again in Acts chapter 15. An offering is sent by the Gentile churches to the churches of Judea because of a famine. We find this account in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and also again in Acts chapter 11. In each of these accounts, we find a variety of reasons for the interconnectedness of the early churches: instruction, reproof, encouragement, charitable contributions, and mission support, just to name a few. It seems as though their purpose of their association was contingent on the challenges and circumstances confronting them at the present time. If they were falling into doctrinal error, instruction and reproof became the predominant reason for their meetings. If one of the churches needed financial support, they contributed to their relief. In all these situations, the early church clearly identified the purpose of their actions, discussed it, and strove to carry out whatever solutions God helped them to identify. Because of this pattern, they were able to successfully address the pressing challenges of their age. The Judean believers were relieved of their hardship during their time of famine. The Corinthian church repented of their sins because of Paul's reproof. The Jewish elders clinging to circumcisions were corrected of their doctrinal error. Teachers were sent to the young churches to help establish doctrine and practice and were welcomed by those Gentile Christians. It is vital that we recognize that none of these things appear to be done with the intention of usurping authority over the local congregation, nor does it seem like these actions were interpreted that way by the churches. The intent of the apostles was clearly a love for God and their fellow brethren. And as a result, they were received with joy and not suspicion or dread. In the Bible Association, we know of no church or messenger present today that has a desire to usurp the authority over the local church, those that are made up and comprise this association. Nor do the signs of such an inappropriate action seem to be on the horizon. We do, however, see these churches facing challenges which we are all struggling to address in one way or another. And so the following recommendations are humbly presented to improve the association's effect and to better utilize the various gifts which are collectively held by us. First recommendation. We recommend to the association that a resolution be passed which clearly identifies the short-term and the long-term goals we want to see addressed. In the pattern of the apostles, we think it would be helpful to periodically establish short-term and long-term goals which identify the challenges of our churches that we are collectively facing, and that we desire the association to attack jointly. Once we identify them, it will give a tremendous amount of guidance to those who will be participating in the association in the future. It will help the subject selection committee identify subjects. It will help all participants better prepare to attend the association. And ministers who are preaching will be able to better know what doctrines and practices may be in question or on the verge of being compromised. These resolutions could include topics such as the attrition of our young people, how to incorporate new music into church, ministerial education, how to support widows and orphans, aiding addicts in the church, how to assist single parents in the church, and other topics that are both doctrinally and practically relevant. Churches would participate voluntarily after the close of the associational meeting, but the annual meeting would present a good opportunity to discuss these matters in one setting. Our second recommendation, allow each church in the association to select one member of their church to be represented on the subject selection committee. Since a large portion of our annual meeting is dedicated to subjects. The topics discussed at the association are often dictated by their interests, their age, and the culture of the church in which they are present. For our subjects to cover a wider array of concerns which are actively affecting the churches, it may be helpful for the committee to meet once a year or more based on the committee's desire to discuss what doctrines and practices need to be addressed at the correct time. The associational moderator could serve as a moderator of this group with no vote unless his church selects him to be represented there, and each church could select one of their messengers to serve on this committee. The third suggestion we'd like to make to the association is to find a way to engage our younger congregation. Each year, the average age of associational participants gets drastically older. Many of the younger men, I am told, including those on this committee, are young ministers who may or may not always be participating in this particular body. To ensure a stable future, it is vital that the association begin to engage in training young men and women, especially non-pastors, to support and participate in this body. There are tasks and procedures of this body that will not come instinctively to our next generation, and we must be able and willing to teach with a measure of love and with a measure of persistence. A failure to do this will become very noticeable in the following generations. In conclusion, our committee believes the association is an extremely valuable institution and has done much good for the churches involved for multiple decades. It has served as a measure of fellowship and has brought about innumerable subjects and sermons that have helped shape all of our churches in one way or another. We further believe that modest changes or improvements can be made to better address the concerns facing all of our churches. At the heart of each of these recommendations is the hope that our relationships with each other will grow deeper and help one another to address problems that we all face collectively. With respect and love, I'll read the report to Chairman Bradley Hicks for their money shares.
Thank you, Brother Morton. All right, you've heard the reading of this report. What's the will of the body?
Motion to adopt.
We have a motion and second to adopt this report. And need to have discussion. And so our chairman has one speech of 10 minutes and two of 5.
I'd like to begin expounding upon our subject today by saying this, that I want to express how incredibly impactful the association has been on me personally. This is something that I was not raised with the privilege of being a part of an association, and having moved to Indianapolis, it was something relatively new to me. But I can say, based on not only the totality of my time spent with the association, when we look at things that are presented to us, specifically if we only look at this year's annual meeting, there have been doctrines and truths presented to us that not only could any of us deny, but that all of us need a good hearty reminder of. All of us need to be brought under remembrance. All of us need instruction. All of us have opportunities to improve. And while I greatly appreciated the message that was preached this morning, and I appreciate so much all of the exhortation that came after it, but imagine if this association was not in existence. That message, although it was wonderful and timely, how many of our ears would have missed that? How many hearts would have missed the blessing of the opportunity to grow from such instruction? And I want to not lift any one above the other. All of the subjects that were presented this year, up until this one, have been extremely impactful and beneficial to us. And I would concede to say that it is not only this year, but every year of this association. If looking back over our history, and we go back to try to be brought under remembrance again of all of those that have served in this association, all the messages that have been preached, all of the subjects that have been presented, they have either directly or indirectly affected all of us in our walk with the Lord. Brothers and sisters, may we never undervalue anybody, regardless of its name, that helps cultivate a greater understanding of the doctrines and the principles and the oracles of God.
Amen.
Those things are not only necessary, they are extremely beneficial to our current age. Some of the things that we talked about is that we tried to take a poll of our generations, both younger and older. And when we tried to talk to not only members of our churches that we are members of, but we tried to reach across as many lines as we could and talk to a lot of people from different backgrounds within the church. And I am very saddened by the fact that nearly everyone under the age of approximately 40 had some type of disassociated understanding of what the association was. Didn't see the purpose of it. When asked in a measure of series of questions, what does the association do? More than one person answered nothing. That's disconcerting. It's disconcerting on a couple of notes. First is because it's not true. The association serves a valuable purpose. And every year, men and women come together and give of themselves and voluntarily come together to try to cultivate the things that we come to do, to try to further the work of the Lord. Now, what we have found is that the reason that a lot of people had a disconnect and a disassociation with what the association does is, one, of all of those that we polled, if they did not completely understand the association or had no idea about it whatsoever, it's because they had never attended an associational meeting. Brothers and sisters, may I ask that you encourage your churches to come to the associational meeting. It is not only for messengers. It is not only for pastors. It is not only for deacons. It serves a tremendous purpose. And of those that come, they have only come once, and it has not been recently. Brothers and sisters, I'll say this. Of anything that is good for you, if God has prescribed it, it is good, typically speaking, in repetition and not only on rare occasion. And this association is good in its annual capacity. But I think it could be even better suited if it was not only isolated to an annual capacity. I believe that there are opportunities that we can pursue to cultivate fellowship, to increase instruction, and to do more to further the gospel together throughout the year and not only one weekend in the month of September. I want to encourage all of us that when we came together for this particular subject, we were asked to try to define the purpose and the desired effect of the association and what we can do to improve upon that. What is the desired effect of the association? What do we hope to gain from coming to these meetings? Now, I know for a lot of us, when we think of the association, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, we're commonly associated with a good time of fellowship. And that's good, and that is fine. Because I want you to know that some of us have great fellowship within our own churches. But some that serve, and some that are maybe not so close to other sister churches, this is an oasis for them in their work for the Lord. They get to come and see brothers and sisters they don't see throughout the year. And they're able to have that renewed fellowship. But I don't want us to be short-sighted in the fact that this is purely an opportunity to come together in fellowship. There's time for fellowship, and those things are great. But as we heard of in our meetings previous to this one, is that even in times of fellowship, it would be beneficial if the conversation took a step in the spiritual direction, and not simply that we sat around and talked about small things, unrighteous things, and worldly things. So my encouragement in taking that liberty from those that are on the committee with me, our belief is what the desired effect is of the association is that we would always look to strive for measures of improvement for not only our own churches, but for our sister churches. That we would constantly engage and try to self-examine and find ways that they might be able to be heightened or extended or made stronger. Brothers and sisters, I'll say this, and I want to get to this portion at the end before at least my first time is up. And I don't know if any of the other committee members wish to speak. But when we think about the things that have been brought before us today, and the things that could still be potentially brought before us before we leave this day, I would encourage you to take these things back to your churches and teach them and reiterate them and show our churches how important and how valuable this meeting can be and has been. I would say this, we would do a great disservice to the Lord and this association if we let this meeting and went back to our home churches and never spoke of what happened this weekend. If someone comes to you and asks how the meeting went, to simply say that it was okay, or not that bad, or pretty good, sells so short what actually happens here. If you hear something that affects your heart, or changes your perspective, or teaches you something that you didn't know, go and tell others. Go and encourage them and say, not only is this what I was able to learn, you should come. You should participate, and in that you could be blessed and encouraged by the things that were presented. As many of you know, of the things that we want to try to encourage to the association, that we try to set goals, that we try to put something in front of us that we would focus on, rather than maybe ambiguously coming and just having a time of fellowship, is that we would set parameters and goals of the things that the churches are facing, that we might be able to better address them. We want to look for ways to engage our members, all of our members, to participate in the association. And one way is to explore ways to engage younger members. From a personal standpoint, the engagement of youth is something that I hold very personal. And I'll say this, it's a twofold. Is that many of you know Southside Church has a lot of youth. And I have heard throughout the years of my time and being a member of Southside, people say, Southside is so blessed with young people. I want to encourage you to be careful in statements such as that, because I don't want it ever to be considered that churches filled with older people are not likewise blessed. If you have older members in your church, I would encourage you to praise God for them. Be grateful that they are still in the way, that they have given themselves to a lifelong service. They have valuable experiences. They have time spent with the Lord. They have wisdom of God that is so underappreciated and undervalued in all of our churches. So when I first say, I want to encourage those older members to not get weary in well-doing. When you see a younger generation that seems to be falling away, that seems to be disinterested, that seems to be consumed with individualism, I would encourage you to stand strong in the faith and continue to contend to that which was once delivered unto all of us. Because our next generation is depending on us, not just in a measure of setting an example, but in a means of discipling them and showing them and teaching them how they ought to live and act. And therein lies, at least personally, the greatest recommendation I can make in a measure of engaging our young people. That I believe that the engagement of our young people can boil down to one pretty simple thing. I am concerned that there is a tremendous lack of discipleship among our churches. We bring our children to church. We take them to Sunday school, hopefully. We engage in other enterprises such as youth weekends or vacation Bible schools, but the actual measure of very perpetrated discipleship is lacking in our homes and in many of our churches. Amen. We have not taught our next generation the importance of godly things. Therein, by and part, we have not taught them the importance of the association. If we want to encourage our young people, we want to see them do right, we need to not only point out their faults, which is necessary at times, but we need to teach them and engage them by showing them through personal experiences how much of an impact the association has had on us and how much of an impact the association can have on them. I believe that Matthew chapter 28 in the Great Commission, it is suggested to us that we should go into all nations and that we should make disciples out of them, teaching them to observe whatsoever that God has taught to us. Brother Mark. When we consider making disciples, I want us to know that this is not only a measure of our own children. I would hope that it would start there, that we as parents would teach our children the value of Christian principles, that we would teach our children the value of an experience of salvation, that we would teach our children the value of a consistent and a very perpetrated attendance of the local body. But it goes past only our children alone. We have a next generation that is lacking biblical and godly instruction. And that instruction cannot be absolved totally from the Lord's churches. So I would encourage us as an association, if we're wanting to look for ways to engage our youth, that we would engage them by means of discipleship. I would say that if you look at this next generation, and I know millennials get a bad rap for the most part. Some of it's fair, some of it's not. But if there's one thing that I have learned about the next generation is they can see straight through hypocrisy and lies. They have no time for nonsense. And unfortunately, what they see organized religion as is just that. May we take it upon ourselves and not shy away from the responsibility. We have an opportunity to break that mold in their heart and to teach them otherwise by our example. That organized religion isn't just a bunch of people that come together and that are hypocritical and are critical of others and constantly looking down their noses. But there were a loving people who love to grow not only in knowledge and truth, but love to grow closer to our Lord and our Savior. Of our younger congregants, I can't imagine that any of them would say, I have no desire to draw closer to the Lord. But it seems like all of them say, I just don't know where to start. I just don't know what steps to take to try to really grow in the understanding and the knowledge of the Lord. I would say this, the association is a great enterprise to do just that. It is a great opportunity for all of us, young and old alike, to grow and gain a better understanding of those things that are so important to us. So with this, and I'll render my time back to the moderator. I believe that the association is extremely, extremely important. I see its value. I see its opportunities. I see the blessings that come from engaging in it. But if we do not teach that to the next generation, these annual meetings are few in number. So may we give consideration on how we might be able to pass this, along with so many other doctrines and truths, on to our next generation. Brother Mark.
All right. Also on that committee is Elder Monty Shoulders. All right. And Brad Hicks. Brad, you have anything you want to add?
Already.
All right. So the subject before you, anyone else want to speak on this subject? Sure.
The Lord said he was response in Marcus. He wants us to be life about his word.
Anybody else?
I have a comment. The Lord has called us to speak in unity. And two opinions divide. If we can speak on the same subject and come to agreement on it, we can persuade someone else that's watching our minds. And that was one of the greatest things I felt when we had when I was younger, is to understand the unity. And like we let watching their behaviors. My own dad's right. The Bible, all the time reading. That unity is from the Word of God. Here he was spoken the same by two people. Good amen. Going out and just trying to be divided. Because some of that I'm trying to persuade God. Association. We are already speaking 15 churches. We speak life. We need to be together. Share that.
Thanks, Brother Dale. Anyone else? Brother Dale, you may.
I look back through history, and one of the things that I find that associations have strengthened churches, and churches that have been afraid of associations there's two things I see. One is they've gone a little away because of the lack of that support and encouragement. And the other is they drift into behaviors and doctrines that are liturgy and the love, the harmony. Bethel, not perfect, but it's a very good association, very good fellowship, and a place I love to get the opportunity to attend.
Appreciate that. We're glad you could come too. If I can address the assistant at this moment, I would just direct everyone's attention to Article 7 of our Constitution. I think that's probably as close to a mission statement as we might find. It says, "It shall be the object of these associations to promote the union of the faith, the gospel, with our educational and mission interests." And then Article 10 says, "These meetings shall be missionary." So in looking through the Constitution, that's the closest to a mission statement I can think. Anyone else wish to speak to? Brother?
Just want to say I appreciate the board.
Yes.
We talked about setting short-term, long-term goals of the association. Personally, from their recommendations, I have goals that I'm taking back right now, is to make sure that our church teaches on every topic that is discussed here in this association. Find some way through the Sunday school program or through preaching to teach those things in the church. Again, at least 5 people that have never been to the association come to the next year for their pastor or church member trying to do something. 5 people on the road area to start. Really pray that God will guide me, disciple me, and the church. Just hit home. We're not good enough. We keep our government together, just see how we're wavering. I want to be in unity and pray for one another. I appreciate the support, and I'm challenged by it, and I look forward to going back.
All right, anyone else? Sure.
Brother Dale, historically, young folks at home about associations in the past, 1700s, in our nation, growing up, they did things called queries. And those are things that were brought by the churches to the meeting to help them to decide what to do or give them instruction in doctrine or in teaching. These things can be done by committees throughout the year. Along those lines, I appreciate the opportunity that you brought resolutions that might come out of this for us to consider. I think it would be very profitable. You know, again, I know some might think that some of this might step on some autonomy between the churches. Let's not go that direction. Let's go the direction of helping one another through the year rather than just once. My great concern also is the lack of discipline, lack of discipleship, lack of Christian value teaching, lack of biblical instruction, real life teaching is what I wrote down. Some of those things that we can address together. We want them involved. I grew up in the association. I grew up listening to the old men. And I'm glad I did. So glad they were here. And now they're gone. And now I'm the old man. So let's continue this work. It's profitable. Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak to this moment, to this subject?
Brother Moderator,
Brother Terry?
as far as I know, the first association in America, Brother Compton, or someone can correct me, was the Philadelphia Baptist Association. Began in 1706, 70 years before we declared our independence from England. So it's been around a while, the idea of associations, and much has been good, and so you would do well. I have a copy of the first 100 years of the Philadelphia Baptist Association. And I've gone back to yet every once in a while, you know, to been amazed at some of the questions that came up at the association and some of the answers that they gave that would just be so different than what we would do. But it's just fascinating. But that desire was there among kindred churches to come together and to discuss things. So, amen to everything that's been said.
All right. Subjects before you. All subjects, if all discussions done.
Wait,
Pardon?
call for the question.
All right, do we have a second? We have a motion second to end discussion.